All right, everybody on the Zoom and the live stream, we are going to get started in just a moment. All right, so friends on Zoom, we will get started in just a moment. If at any point you have trouble hearing me, just give me a heads up and I will do everything I can to rectify that. So I'm just gonna go ahead and sign in. All right, I think we are officially live. So friends on Zoom, we're gonna get started in just a moment. All right, so I think we're ready to get started, everybody. We also have our live stream going. Awesome. For those of you who are here, don't forget there's food in the corner. Take some home with you. We also are so delighted to have Jackie and Josh from the Radon Project here. They're going to tell you more about what they do, how you can get involved, and how important citizen science is for public health. We also have our friends from the Philadelphia Free Library here. I'm going to invite Aaron up in a second just to talk a little bit about what they do because they are so kindly hosting this event. And of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't thank our partners and friends. This includes the Network of National Library of Medicine's All of Us Program Center. We're so grateful to them for making tonight's event possible, as well as the All of Us Research Program. And of course, I'm Caroline from SciStarter. SciStarter is a global citizen science organization. If you go to scistarter.org, you can find real science you can do, often by collecting or analyzing data for ongoing research projects. And tonight, people who are physically with us, we definitely want the event to be interactive. For the folks who are virtually with us on Zoom, we want it to be interactive with you too. So don't be shy about making your voice heard in the chat. If there are any issues with the audio throughout, we view you as our partners in this. So we want to know that as well. But I'm going to go ahead and pass the mic to Aaron to tell us a little bit about what the Philadelphia Free Library has to offer. So Aaron, if you want to come up and grab the mic, that would be awesome. And then the camera is right there. Yes.
I'll join Aaron.
Yay!
Hello, my name is Erin. I'm one of the science and wellness librarians here at the Grady Central Library. It's one of 54 locations within the Free Library Philadelphia system.
And I'm Alan Mary. I'm the department head of the Science and Wellness Department. I work with Aaron on a daily basis. Work with Caroline and everyone else to put this program together. So welcome.
Yeah. And tell us a little bit about what y'all do. What does the Philadelphia Free Library have to offer our local Philadelphians?
Oh, well, quite a bit, even just in our department, the Science and Wellness Department. Like Erin has like a charity yoga class that she's organized once a week. We also have health talks for pet medicine that our librarian is working on. We have like all the cookbooks in the central library. Subjects like finance, so investing in personal finance books, all the books on animals, whether they're a pet or in the wild. So really a wide variety of subjects that we have in our department. We also have a digital resource specialist who helps people who need some help using the computer, like a job application, resume. So we've got a lot going on to help people.
Fantastic. Go for it.
Yeah, so we primarily partner with a lot of community-based organizations in the city. For example, we host urban and bike riding courses with Indigo and the Bicycle Coalition. So they come teach courses to folks to learn how to bike safely in the city and how to use the Indigo system. As Alan mentioned, we partner up with Penn Medicine, who come in once a week to talk about various popular health-related topics such as cancer, diabetes, urinary health, etc. Again, we post weekly chair yoga class. We also post a craft circle called So What twice a week. It is immensely popular. If you're between the ages of 7 and 97, you are an expert at crafting. And there's nothing at craft. It's a great opportunity to learn from your peers on how to really make anything that you want. So that's about it. I'm sorry.
All right. Cool, thank you. And as a quick note, everybody is in the physical room with us. And thank you again to our partners at the library. We're so grateful to you. So for folks in the physical room and folks watching online, this meeting is being live streamed and recorded. So if you're in the physical room and you ask a question, we'll probably pass the mic to you so the people online can hear it. If you're online and you ask a question, we may shout you out by name and say, hey, you know, Jimmy from Philadelphia wants to know. So that's something that I was just like to note for these events. But yeah, nice to be here, team. We appreciate you. Okay, so I'm going to do a quick intro before we pass the mic to our friend Jackie, who's going to talk about her project. And after Jackie, my Linda from the All of Us Research Program will be sharing a little bit about health research. But I want to give you all some framing about what citizen science is before we got moving. So citizen science, you may have heard this term before. It goes by a lot of different names. You can call it citizen science, neighborhood science, community science, participatory science. Ultimately, what it is a collaboration between researchers and the public to make a difference. So citizen science is any way a member of the public can be a meaningful part of the scientific enterprise. As I mentioned earlier, usually it's by collecting or analyzing data. And data is just information. Data can be words and pictures. So you can document what you see in your community and submit it to researchers so they can understand where different plants and animals are. And if those plants and animals might need our help, if their species are threatened, for example. Citizen science can be analysis. So if you go over our table in the back, for those of you who are on Zoom, if you go to citizensciencemonth.org, we have bookmarks about different citizen science projects you can find on SciStarter, like the Stall Catchers Project, where you're able to analyze videos of mouse brains for researchers who are studying Alzheimer's. So it's a super diverse field. It's everything from astronomy to health to ecology and everything in between. So I'm really grateful that I get to spend my days doing citizen science and meeting people like you who are really interested in it. And if at any point you all have any issues with the audio, just let me know. All right, so what is SciStarter? So I mentioned that I'm from SciStarter. We also have our founder in the back, Darlene Cavalier, and Jackie here from the SciStarter team locally. SciStarter, I mentioned, is a citizen science organization, and there are lots of different ways to interface with SciStarter. So we hosted it in this one, but if you go to scistarter.org at any point, you can find a real project you can do, and you can search based on your own preferences. Maybe you really like being outside. You can find projects where you can submit data to researchers from outside. Maybe you really like being inside. You can find projects that you can do on a computer from anywhere or in your own home. There are certain citizen science projects you can do to study your home. The whole thing about SciStarter is finding the right fit for you for something that you're curious or concerned about, so you can take action and investigate things about issues you care about. So that is SciStarter. I know you might have more questions. That's an example of that Stall Catchers project, and I also want to prime our in-person people. These bookmarks are in the back for you. So that's the Stall Catchers project for Alzheimer's research, and the reason we call it Stall Catchers is you're catching the stalled blood vessels. So you're going in there and you're figuring out, oh, is this blood vessel stalled? Is this blood vessel flowing? And believe it or not, by making that simple annotation online through an online game, you're helping move Alzheimer's research forward. There's also the Globe at Night project where you're able to study light pollution. That's when you look up at the night sky and indicate how many stars you're able to see in the featured constellation. If there are stars you can't see, that means that your view of the night sky is being obscured by artificial light. So the Globe at Night project is a really important project, and light pollution is a big problem. It can disrupt human health, right? Our circadian rhythms, our ability to sleep. It can disrupt ecosystem health, like animal migration. So the first step to solving these problems is having that data-driven understanding through citizen science. So I want to give some examples of some different projects before we get into our featured projects today, which are all under the theme of genes and journeys. And the reason we did that is I'm going to be talking about Project Sidewalk a little later. I know originally we said we were going to talk about IC Change, But we switched it up a little bit. I'm going to tell you about Project Sidewalk. So we want to talk about accessibility at all levels and community well-being at all levels. At the level of Project Sidewalk, like analyzing data for sidewalk accessibility, more on that later. At the level of Jackie's project about detecting radon in your home. At the level of the All of Us research program, which is up here on the slide, where you fill out surveys and contribute biosamples anywhere in the US and help make research more inclusive and medicine more inclusive. And we have a guest speaker, Mylinda, who's going to be talking to us about that on Zoom in just a little bit. So today's theme, Genes and Journeys, we wanted you to go on a journey with us through citizen science as part of the 1 million acts of science tonight. That's what we're doing all April. We're trying to get 1 million acts of science. And your attendance at this event tonight is an act of science. But we have the All of Us research program that Mylinda's going to tell us about how you can take surveys and donate things like blood samples to make research more inclusive. If you're interested in learning more, you can go ahead and go to this link, joinallofus.org/CSM24. I'll also email it out to everybody who's registered. And we have flyers about the All of Us research program in the back. But Mylinda will tell it best. Once again, the network of the National Library of Medicine made today possible. And some of those projects I told you about are spotlighted through them. And this is an act of science. If you want to report your act of science today, I'm going to be reporting on behalf of the event. But maybe you go home and you do that Globe at Night project tonight. That's an act of science right there. And you can report it at 1millionactsofscience.org. And all sorts of different things count as an act of science, like tonight's event, reporting observations, engaging in all these different projects I told you about, doing Jackie's project, that's an act of science right there. And I think that's the perfect segue to pass the mic to Jackie to tell us a little bit about your project. So if you want to come on up and tell us about it, I'll advance the slides for you, and I know Josh is here too.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you for everybody being here. And I'm going to take my 10 minutes and I want to talk mostly about the Premier Youth Ambassadors for Radon Reduction and the project that they did, which is a calendar. My name is Jackie Nixon, and I am the Marketing and Communications Director, and I'm a Pennsylvania Citizens for Radioactive Radon Reduction representative. I represent the whole state, and we do things nationally as well, and we are international. So I want to talk about the Premier Youth Ambassadors, but before I do that, I want to do this. The Premier Youth Ambassadors are a group of youth who have some sort of a science project that has to do with radon gas. Radon gas, what is that? Radon gas is a gas that is in the ground. It's from decayed uranium, and it basically decays, and then it can seep into the cracks within your home or your building or your workplace and accumulate. When it accumulates, it then can attack your lungs, and it is the second leading cause of lung cancer, and it's #1 among never smokers like myself. I did have lung cancer, upper left lobe removed due to radon gas, which I was living at high levels and didn't know it. So with that said, that's another story for another time. With that said, we decided, I've been with Citizens for Radioactive Radon Reduction for 9 years. And in that 9 years, we fell into youth who have this curiosity about this gas. So we decided we were going to start an initiative with these young people. And whatever project they want to do, whatever interests them regarding radon gas, regarding lung cancer, regarding their communities, we were going to help them. So this is one, Joshua Keys here. He is one of our Premier Youth Ambassadors. He started a project that had to do with animals. Just so you know, animals are affected by radon. And as you know, many animals, they actually die from lung cancer, from cancer, you know, the lungs in that area. So anyway, I want Josh to introduce himself real quick.
I'm Joshua Keys, and I work with Jackie as her marketing assistant. I'm also a part of the Premier Youth Ambassadors for Radon Reduction. And bottom line is what we do is we're young advocates who come up with our own radon projects, and we then execute them with a mentor or someone that helps us to help get these projects up and running off the ground. And so Jackie is one of my mentors, as well as someone from another radon organization as well, is helping me to get my study with animals up off the ground.
Thanks, Josh. Okay, so I'm holding this for a reason, and you'll see it in a minute. So anyway, first of all, We cannot always build our future, the future for our youth, but we can build our youth for the future. And with the future of radon, which is not known, then we are using the youth, or I should say, we're not really using them, they're using us actually. But bottom line, we're educating them. And what is radon? How does it attack people? What, what can we do about it? All right. So next slide, please. These are some of our Premier Youth Ambassadors, and this is from November 2023. They were on a panel at a symposium, and they were outstanding. And you will see many of them on our websites and whatnot, but I just want to introduce you and let you see some of them and what they did. They spoke at an annual symposium, and 2 of them presented at the main portion of that. They were awesome. Next slide, please. Reimagine radon, building radon leaders. Next slide, please. Okay. By the way, that's Catherine Dixon. She is with Johns Hopkins University, and she's one of our Premier Youth Ambassadors. So what is the mission? And our mission is for these ambassadors is for us, and we're trying to develop programs for young adults across the country, and they have a strong sense of civic responsibility, and they have a commitment to their communities regarding radon gas. They want to do something. So we help with training them in testing, mitigation, and of course, we educate them. Next slide. That is Juan. And Juan is also at Johns Hopkins University. He's doing a study on radon as well. Now, the program goals: we educate, empower, encourage, support, and collaborate. Educate, we train them in radon. What is radon? We train them so they can go out among the community, people in the community, and they'll be able to talk about it. They'll be able to pass the word on, to try to get them to act in some way, to test. We also pair them with industry leaders. We have industry leaders in, when I say industry, radon industry, that help them with their projects. They have questions, and if they have a question that's scientific, you don't come to me. We match you with a physicist, or we match you with whomever you need to get that part of your study done. We further the radon advocacy. We train you, and we expose you to the radon world, and it is its own industry. And then we also get you involved in these kinds of events so that you can talk to people and learn how to relay that message, what people's needs are. And then we support their projects. We make sure that we are supporting them. We want to make sure that their success, to be honest with you, they're in success. So, and then we promote future endeavors. Many of them started with one project, they are now on a second project. So if you want to do another one, that's great. Many of them have gone to college now, and they're working on radon projects in their colleges, which is amazing. So next slide, please. That is Mia Ray. Mia Ray graduated from Harrisburg University in biology, and she's now working on a study, but has to do with radon, in Penn State in Pennsylvania. So what does it take? Awareness, interpersonal skills, explore science, personal interest, and collaboration. We want current and global issues. We want to make them aware of this. It's not just happening in your neighborhood. This is a global problem. And we want you to be aware of that. Improve building blocks. We want to make sure that whatever it is you're trying to do, we improve the blocks that you're going to need to be a success. And that might mean you go on to be a doctor, but when you go on to be a physician of any type or whatever, you've got that radon knowledge, right? And you could take that building block into your next career. That's what we're trying to do. And then, causes and effects of radon. We want you to know what those are, and we train you in the NRPP, NRSB certified radon training courses. And we have those online. Project development, we help you with the project. And then community involvement, we want each and every one of our PYA to be involved in the community somehow. Next slide. And then lastly, outcomes. What do we get out of this? We've got youth with good leadership skills. We've got youth that have an intercultural understanding. We've got youth with networking opportunities. And if they want to go to the next level, they've already, integrated with the radon industry. We also integrate with the universities. We integrate with all of the different facets that are needed for them to be a success. And then global perspectives. They've got a better understanding that this is not just in their neighborhood, where you might move to Utah, high levels of radon. You can move to Canada, extremely high levels of radon. You need to know this. And then the community service experience, we get them involved with events. We take them along, like Josh. He came to this event with me. He's been to the health equity, Pennsylvania Health Equity, that was in Harrisburg just 2 weeks ago. And then future radon leaders. We're trying to build leaders that, bottom line, no matter what you go into, even if you just decide to become a mother, you are aware. And you can tell your neighbor. Next slide, please. Now, that's the fun part. This is the calendar that I'm holding up. And this is what's actually, with the help of the PYA, we created a calendar. We decided that, how can we educate children? You could talk to them, and some of them know about radon and talk about science, but we wanted to make it a little bit more exciting. It could be a dry subject. So we created this school calendar, it's a radon school calendar. And in the calendar, we create superheroes, and the PYA did this. And so we have a superhero, and I forgot how many we have now, Josh, but anyway, we've got a few. And each one of them has a name, like eco, for ecology, right? And then we've got kid, for test kids. We've got, there was a mitigator, we got one for mitigator, called Gator, as a matter of fact. So anyway, they all have their own superpower too. So they're out there flying around the world, helping to fight this thing called radon. And they each have a superpower to do that with. So we created that. Now in this calendar, we also have, and it was there, the PYA, they said, you gotta have a villain. So the villain's name is Thoron. And Thoron is the mother of, I would say, radon, okay? And Thoron turns into, I think it's uranium, and then from uranium, it goes to decayed uranium, which causes the radon. So Thoron wreaks havoc around the world and with this radon issue. And then, so we put that in there. And then we did this with, there's a CRCPD poster contest, and you should really look that up. And what they do is they put it out for every school in the United States. They can draw their idea of radon. And then it's a poster contest. And then the top winners, they submit it in, and then they pick the top, let's say like the top 3 for the state, and the Pennsylvania winners, and the Virginia winners, and things of that sort. We have been doing this for 5 years with this calendar. We get to pick the posters. They are on the inside, and you'll see one of them up there that one of the kids drew. And we put those on the top, superheroes on the bottom. And then we decided we're going to make bookmarks. And that's another thing that kids can use. They can put them in there, and it tells a little bit about a few of the superheroes and the story about radon and how they fight radon. We also have t-shirts in our pro shop. And the t-shirts are customizable, so you can have any superhero that you want. Kids can pick the one they want. You can also put your logo on them. So if you want to get them for the hospital logo could be on them, and you could give them to the kids in the children's ward or something like that. Really cool idea. And we have the matching masks. They can pick whatever superhero they want on their mask. So we have those available. And then of course we have our buttons, the superhero buttons. I'm wearing one, and all these folks in the audience have a button. And you are all now superheroes and radon rivals. I expect great things out of all of you.
Woo.
Next slide, please. All right. Now, being a mentor, we also have a mentor program. That mentor program is where we are asking industry leaders, education, doctors, unit testers, mitigators, you name it. We have professors. We're asking you to be a mentor to these students. When they have questions, and they've got a question about something on the science end or something on the education, or how do I create an event in my neighborhood, I would hook them up with one of you. And then I'll say, could you help them with how this would be done where you are? Or answer that question for them. You're not glued to their hip and they're not glued to your hip. We have a database that you can go in and you can sign up as a mentor, or you can just call me or email me, and I will absolutely add you to the database. And then you can help whoever has a question, you just hook them up when they're needed, when you're needed. So that's what we do there. And next slide, I think basically that's about it with that. Those are some of our mentors that we have right now. We've got more to put on these slides, as a matter of fact. But these are our mentors. They have helped in many, many ways with these students, and they're still helping with them. So we would love to get your logo up there. We would love to get your picture up there, whatever it takes. Next slide. All right, that is our contact information. And basically, you can contact it at any time. And the other thing I wanted to relate to you is we have a library lending program. And I didn't have a slide for it, but the library lending program, what we do is we encourage the libraries to, you could purchase, say 5 of the continuous monitors. The continuous monitors monitor radon on a regular basis constantly. So radon levels can be higher at night, and then in the day, they can be higher in the winter as opposed to the summer. It depends on if your windows are open or closed, So the continuous monitor will monitor that. So there's a library lending program that each library can participate in. And with that program, you can have people come and check out one of the continuous monitors, and then they can go test their home, their property or whatever, and find out what their readings are, and then they bring it back, just like a book. And the key, or let's say the idea is to get people to know their numbers. The government level radon is 4 picocuries per liter. When they tested my home, 7 months after my lobectomy, when I had the lung cancer surgery, it was found. I didn't even know about this radon issue. It was brought up to me. Did you ever hear of radon? And that's how I got to figure it out. They tested, and it was 18 picocuries. That's the equivalent of smoking a pack of cigarettes a day. So if you're living in high levels of radon, keep that in your mind. At least know your numbers. If it's under 4, you're probably, you're okay. I'm not gonna say you're perfect, because it depends on how much you consume, but bottom line, anything above 4, you should think about doing something about it. But at least test, know where you stand. And then we can always talk about, okay, what do we do to fix it? Okay, that's called early detection. All right, and that's it. Thank you so much. Anybody that would like me to contact them, or you've got any questions, please email me. I'm always on my email, and I'll get back to you right away. Thanks so much.
Awesome! Woo! All right, so I know we're about to start my Linda's talk, but Jackie, if you don't mind, I'll ask you 1 or 2 questions.
Oh,
You wanna
sure.
stay up here? So this is very exciting, and I love situating this project, especially with youth focus and the whole citizen science ecosystem. So could you tell us about some of your big research findings so far? If you have any of those, or just cool insights from the program you want to share? Because I love how you highlighted the youth ambassadors, but I'd love to hear about some of the science specifics too.
Science specifics. Well, that's a good one for me because I'm not a scientist. However, the science side of it, okay, we'll talk about some of the students' studies that they're doing. Brian Yang, he's 17 years old, he did a TEDx. And he did that based on a project he did in Lehigh Valley, Pennsylvania. And he did some testing and whatnot. He was trying to get his school tested. And it wasn't that successful. I mean, he's working at it still. He's not going to quit. But he did a geological study because as at Lehigh Valley, the Harrisburg area, high levels of radon. And it's due to shale rock and, it's just everywhere. So bottom line, he studied and he found this out. He took his studies and he called 2 representatives and he presented the studies to them and told them, this is what's going on in my neighborhood. And he presented how high the levels were. Just to let you know, Brian's grandfather has lung cancer right now. That's what sparked him to do this. Let's see, David, actually, his mom died of lung cancer in 2020. And as a result, David started his own nonprofit called orange3.org. And what he did was, he was only 16 when he did it. He had actually got the high school, some of his friends to become the board of directors. They literally, I got people to donate. They would send out test kits and they tracked how many they sent out. They sent out over 500 in 2 years. That's more than we ever did. I mean, just our organization, we don't do that much, but that was impressive. So he's working on expanding his project. Josh is doing one, and if you'd like to talk a little bit, just
Yeah, bring
briefly
Josh up.
about your
Yes.
project
Woo!
and what you're doing.
Just so, back in last year, I started, to find out about, the EcoQ monitor. And from the EcoQ monitor, we know that, you have to keep it 2 feet off the ground. And the reason being for that is that, it will pick up other contaminants. And so you don't want to put it any lower than 2 feet off the ground. And so I had a question, what if you put it on the ground, what other radioactive contaminants would pick up? And so I started working with another organization on building a study on how we find that out. And so what I did was I took the EcoQ, which is one of the devices from EcoSense that is used to one of the continuous monitors that Jackie talked about. And so we took it and I put one on my bed and I took it and tested the levels from my bedside. What did that look like? And then I took that EcoQ and I put it on the floor and I set it on the floor and to see what those levels would test. Well, it turned out to be about 4 to 6 degrees higher on the floor than it was on the bedside. And so I said, what is that? Why is it behaving in that mannerism? And one of the active contaminants that we found out that it was actually picking up was the thorium, which is one of the mothers of radon. And so it just showed that it is higher on the ground, and that this device can pick up other radioactive contaminants on the ground. And I have pets that, I have 2 dogs. And so I said, that's what sparked me to want to find out what they were breathing in. And we know that with pets, it can damage them a lot quicker than it would us because we have larger lungs than they have. And so right now I'm working on an active study on the analysis of comparative levels of radon exposure between humans and animals. And I'm working with an organization in Colorado as well as another organization called EcoSense.
Yay, that's so impressive. All right. My last question for Jackie and Josh before we have my Linda present about the All of Us Research Program. So the theme this month is 1 million acts of science, right? So being at this event tonight, Act of Science, participating in any of the projects we have spotlighted on the side study table, Act of Science, participating in all of us, Act of Science. If you can recommend one act of science related to your project that people can do right after this program, the folks we got in person and the people watching on Zoom, what act of science should we do? What's our act of science related to the radon project?
I think the act of science should be everyone go and get a test kit. Now, you can get the charcoal, there's one on the table there you can look at. The charcoal kit is, you can get those at your local hardware store, Home Depot, Lowe's, or whatever. Take that home and first of all, measure, test your home and find out what your number is. The other act of science that you can do is get one for your neighbor. Test their home. Just because your levels might be low does not mean your neighbor is not high. So find out what your neighbor's levels are at the same time. And then if those things are, you compare them and find out, do we need to do something about this? And that's a very simple act of science that everyone can do and it possibly save lives.
All right. Woo! Oh, Josh has one too.
And I would say, grab an EcoQ device. Continuously know your numbers. Don't just stop at a charcoal tester. Continuously know your numbers because at any point in time, your level could change, and you will want to monitor that, and know that that you have that assurance of continuously knowing what your radon level is. I mean, we're living in a world of tech, and so these continuous monitors constantly are monitoring your radon levels. You can see them out as far as a year, as far as a week, as far as a month. So I think it's really important to prevent what happened to Jackie, to continuously know your numbers, not just once, but continuously actively monitoring those radon levels.
All right. Woo, thank you so much.
Our calendar will be out in June, and we're going to put it in, we're translating it to Spanish this year as well. So get some and get them to the, like buy 30 of them and actually distribute them to the local school, your local school classroom, science classroom, something of that sort. And if you have any questions, contact me. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Up next, we got Mylinda. Mylinda, are you able to hear us loud and clear?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, let me crank the volume back on up.
And then are you seeing the correct slides?
Yes, and you need to flip it.
Flip it. That's what I meant. Yep.
All right.
Let's
There we go. Now you're in the room audio, which is great. Yes, so switch presenter view so we can see your slides like normal. So swap displays. Perfect. All right.
Hey.
The floor is yours. Thank you so much for presenting to us tonight.
Thank you. And I wish I could see you all. I wish I was actually there with you in person, and I'm so sorry that I'm not, but I had clinic today and we have not perfected teletransportation quite yet. And so I couldn't make it from Pittsburgh to Philly in time. But this is our next best version to that, is giving a virtual talk. So my name is Dr. Mylinda Massart, and I am at the University of Pittsburgh and UPMC, and I'm in the Department of Family Medicine and our Clinical and Translational Science Institute and Institute for Precision Medicine. And I'm just going to talk a little bit about the impact of precision medicine and genetics on our health. So just to get us started, what is precision medicine? So precision medicine is an emerging approach for disease treatment and prevention that takes into account individual variability in genes, environment, and lifestyle for each person. So that really means that we're taking care of each individual patient as a unique entity that is a combination of their genetics, what they inherited from their families, and then all of their environment and how their environment has influenced their health, just like the radon talk that we just heard about. Precision medicine is not really a new concept, even though it's kind of an evolving concept in how we practice healthcare, but really thinking about applying the right treatment to the right patient at the right time has truly always been the goal of healthcare. And you can see in these images just two examples, right? So every one of us who are wearing glasses, we do not have the exact same prescription. And so we can't have just one set of glasses for everyone. We each need that to be customized. And if you think about blood types and blood transfusions, the same thing is true, right? There's a few less variabilities there, but we do all have different types of blood. And I'm actually AB positive, which is really rare. And it's really important. It actually can be life-saving or life-threatening if we donate blood or receive a blood transfusion that isn't the right match for us. So what this really boils down to is one size fits all medicine or healthcare doesn't actually work. Most medical treatment has been historically designed to the average population of patients. And that average population of patients were those who were participating in research over the last 50 to 70 years, which truly actually didn't represent all of us. And so the average is based on data sets that really are not made to represent everyone, and therefore are not really applicable to everyone in the clinical setting. And so precision medicine is an attempt to actually do better and actually practice healthcare better and more specifically to each of us as unique individuals. So why is this now sort of the era of precision medicine? What has led to us really evolving our thinking and also really being able to accelerate the application of precision medicine in clinical care? Well, two main things changed over the last 15 years or so. One was the advancement of genetics or genomics in terms of research and the cost of being able to do that type of science. And the second is that actually generates massive amounts of data. And so we had also the growth of information technology and the capacity to store all this data now in the cloud and then access it instantaneously when we need it. And really the combination of those two things provided us the tools to advance the science. The other thing that happened, many of you are probably aware, and this is kind of a while ago now, is that we finished the first version of sequencing the human genome back in about 2003. That was a 10-year endeavor, and it cost an unbelievable amount of money to do that. And it was such a large project. One genome had to be divided up and sent to labs all over the world to be done. Now we can actually sequence a genome in an hour for less than $500 in something the size of my laptop right here. So that's really to show you how this technology and cost has changed. That's really allowing us to access this type of information now and integrate it into clinical care. So let's go back and have a little bit of scientific review about genetics. So this picture probably looks familiar to a lot of you. This is how we tend to imagine our chromosomes in kind of this cartoon figure. Humans have 46 chromosomes in general. We have 23 pairs, one that we inherit from our biological mother and one that we inherit from our biological father. And then we have one pair of sex chromosomes, XX, which identifies female at birth, and XY, which identifies male at birth. And then you might remember that chromosomes are made of DNA, or deoxyribonucleic acid. These chromosomes live inside the cell, as you can see again in this cartoon, and again have that sort of characteristic picture that we see that looks almost like an X figure. If we unwound that DNA that's tightly packaged into that X-looking figure, we would actually see the individual nucleotides, or A's and G's and C's and T's that make up our DNA. When we look at all the A's and G's and C's and T's, it's kind of like reading a book. If you could imagine all the letters in a book. And our genes are like single individual words in that book. And that's how we often explain genetics to our patients. And so sometimes we have variations in our genes, and those variations can lead to different health outcomes, and they might actually predispose us to be stronger or to run races more quickly, or they might predispose us to developing high blood pressure or diabetes. And so those things are important. And if we know those things, perhaps we can modify other risk factors to improve our health outcomes. So again, if we look at a gene is one set of instructions for how to make a protein. And proteins are the worker bees in our body that go and do all the activities in our cells to sustain us to be alive. These genes are embedded in those chromosomes, which have thousands of genes in them, which are thousands of sets of instructions for how to make all of those proteins. And then you also will often hear the word genome, and that's all of the sets of all of the instructions to make all the proteins we need in our body. So I really love this slide because I think it's very fascinating. Genetically, every human on this planet is 99.9% genetically identical, which is really, really amazing. Because if you look around the room, and I'm not there, but I'm guessing if you look around the room right now, there's probably no one who's identical. We are all unique individuals. So how does that happen? It turns out that there's a lot of different variation in our genetics that I'm going to explain a little bit about today. And it's that variation that leads to our diversity. So there can be variation in the DNA spelling itself, in the code. That's just normal variation. And there can be variation in how the DNA is folded, which actually can affect how genes are expressed, how those proteins are made, and whether those genes are turned on or off. There can also be variation in the number of copies of genes that we have. And that can actually change how we look and our individual health. So when we think about the variations or spelling changes in our DNA, we call these single nucleotide polymorphisms, or SNPs. And these actually occur about every 300 one of these letters. Most of these spelling changes are actually just healthy. They don't result in any change at all in our overall health. They do not lead to disease, and we don't think of them as mutations. They're just normal variation, and they are part of what makes us all unique and distinct. These types of spelling changes you may have heard before can be passed on from generation to generation. And the spelling changes that are related to predisposition to certain types of health conditions are often thought of as dominant, like a condition called familial hypercholesterolemia, or very high cholesterol that's passed from generation to generation. Or they can be recessive, like cystic fibrosis. They can be associated with the X chromosome and be X-linked dominant. And there's one called Fragile X syndrome. Or they can be X-linked recessive, and that's one common one is hemophilia. They can be codominant. That actually goes back to our blood example. And there's even a special little organelle in each cell, which is actually sort of the energy producer of each cell, called the mitochondria. And the mitochondria has its own little set of DNA. And so you can have spelling changes as well in that DNA that can lead to various health conditions. So in addition to the genomics or the genetics and what we inherit, which can contribute to our overall health and wellness, it turns out that our environment can do that as well. Again, going back to that great talk that we just had about radon. So our diet, our exercise, the medications we take, our gut microbiome, where we live, all of those things, even trauma, emotional trauma, physical trauma, all can actually travel down and impact how our chromosomes are folded and then affect gene expression, which can change even more variation between each and every one of us and impact our health. So that is commonly referred to as epigenetics. And the epigenetics specifically is talking about how that DNA is packaged and folded up tightly. And again, that can result in certain genes being activated and expressed and other genes being turned off and silenced. And these are directly activities that are related to our environment. So if we are exposed to radon, that radon can actually travel all the way. That signal can be transmitted all the way down to the nucleus and to our DNA and change how our DNA is being expressed, eventually perhaps leading to the development of lung cancer. So our health is definitely not just related to genes, it's also related to our environment. So genetics is one of the core features of precision medicine, but also understanding our lifestyles, our environments, our social and structural influencers of health is also equally important, because all of that adds up to each and every one of us as being an individual. Sometimes you may have heard of many other types of things beyond the genome titled OME. And this is just a couple of different examples of that. And that's, again, taking all these various layers of data and then adding them all up to predict our individual health. To do this, you can imagine we need to do a lot of scientific research, and we need to research a lot of different individuals to understand how this all impacts each of us uniquely. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that, about the All of Us study towards the end. Before we do that, I want to give one example of how we are already in healthcare using this type of precision medicine and genetic information to improve health outcomes. And that's something called pharmacogenomics or pharmacogenetics. And that's looking at these little single nucleotide polymorphisms, these little spelling changes in the alphabet in our DNA that actually can affect how we metabolize medication. So for a long time, we have known that medications, the same medications, do not work the same in everybody. In fact, again, I don't know how many of you are in the room, but if we gave you all the exact same medication, let's say an antidepressant, it would only work in a fraction of you, maybe only 38% of you. And for the rest of you, it wouldn't work. And we'd have to keep thinking about what's the best medicine, or do we need a higher dose, or do we need to change to a total different class of medication? And sometimes that can prolong achieving therapy for a very, very long time. So one of the main reasons that this happens, why medication doesn't work for everyone, is because of our genetics and those small bits of variation that make us each unique. So if we could actually test those and know those, we could better predict which medications might be more successful for individuals, which individuals might need higher doses of medication or lower doses, and actually more importantly, which individuals might have a bad reaction or a side effect to certain medications that we should actually avoid. So what is the rest of the parts of our health that actually influence whether medication work? Well, you might have just guessed it. It's actually our environment, right? It's the food we're eating, the other medication we're taking that might interact with each other. And so all of this together, we can put this information and better use what we call precision prescribing, right? And try to get the right medication for the right patient at the right time. So one of the reasons that I think this is critically important is not only to achieve therapy faster, but actually almost 10% of all patients have bad reactions to medications. And over 100,000 hospitalizations a year actually occur because of these bad reactions. So imagine how much healthcare dollars we could also save and hassle for patients if we knew exactly in advance what medications to avoid. So I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about another popular subject around genetics and DNA, and that's ancestry genetics. So many of you are probably very familiar with this concept. And a lot of people get super into this and do all sorts of genealogy research, both through studying like large databases of ancestry research, as well as looking at genetics. So what is actually genetic ancestry testing looking at? So genetic ancestry can be thought of in two different ways. One is something called biogeographical ancestry. So that's how, where in the world do our ancestors actually hail from? And there are certain changes on the DNA spelling that actually we can track and predict where various ancestors have hailed from around the world. And those are called ancestry informative markers. The other type of ancestry testing is called lineage ancestry. And that's where we actually are tracing our paternal or maternal lines of descent and actually seeing where they originated from to like a common ancestor. So genetic inheritance can be studied because there is common ancestry and fragments of our DNA are passed down from generation to generation. And just like that's how we inherit predispositions to different health conditions, it also can be traced all the way back. And so that we can see, we can actually see where and who we are related to. There are 3 different types of genetic ancestry testing that people look at. One is Y chromosome, which is actually looking at paternal lineage. One is called mitochondrial DNA, which is inherited mostly maternally. So that's looking at your maternal lineage. And the other is, again, looking at these famous single nucleotide polymorphisms, or SNPs again. And as I mentioned, there are these very specific ancestry informative markers which trace back to specific regions around the world. And so we can look at any one individual's DNA, look at these different markers, and then ask, you know, what percentage of their DNA is European, what percentage is Native American, what percentage is African or African American, for example. However, there are some challenges with this, and I think it's really important for everyone to know that, because I think our identity and our ancestry is really critical to us as who we are. And sometimes people can engage in this testing and get really surprising results back. And so I want everyone to realize that these ancestry informative markers are actually only looking at 2% of your entire genome, right? And then maybe perhaps they're reporting that 50% of that 2% is of African lineage. So it's not saying that 98% of the genome is different than that. It's the rest of the genome, they're not actually looking at it all. And it also is looking at markers from contemporary individuals. We don't have DNA samples representing hundreds and thousands of years ago. And so this is actually showing where best estimates and guesses are based on these, how the markers are currently set up. But we know that there has been great migrations over time. And so some of this might be giving us a little bit of a false impression about our ancestors and their history and where they came from. But the most important thing, I think, is if you do this, is to do it for fun, but not to have it change your self-identity, and to recognize that this is just a tiny little bit of information that they're looking at and not the whole picture of who you are. Another surprise that might happen sometimes when people engage in DNA ancestry testing is they find relatives they didn't know about. So I always want to encourage everyone to be ready that something like that could actually happen. For many people, that's a great thing. This is actually a pair of sisters who found each other through a commercial DNA ancestry testing company. But for others, again, that could really challenge what you know about yourself and your family unit. So anyone who does any of this, I want you to be prepared for things like that. So finally, how do we take this and put it all back together? And how do we use all this new advancing science and technology to improve our preventative health care, to reduce chronic disease burden, to personalize and enhance our treatments, to improve our lifestyle choices and guide us, to reduce our environmental exposures, again, related to that radon. And one of the big things I think we all really care about is how can we eradicate cancer? How do we get there? Well, to do that, we have to do research. And I heard you asking in the last session, like, what's the science thing you can do? And I'm telling you a little bit about the All of Us research study today. But my thing that I want you to think about is just in general participating in a research study, any research study that you think is appropriate for you to consider. I always tell everyone that I don't have $1 million to donate to research or to science or to my university, but I can donate a little bit of time and sometimes even my DNA to a research study to advance healthcare. So that's my one thing I want to empower you all to think about. So the All of Us research program was launched in 2018 across the country to create a biobank of both genetic data and then to capture electronic health record data to show how patients' health evolves over time, and then to do a lot of survey data, and then even capture wearable data. There are folks in All of Us who are actually capturing sensor data and sharing that back. All of that data goes to a big central database where it's de-identified, so no one who's doing research can actually trace back who that individual person was that contributed to the research. But all of this is amassing the largest collection of data we've ever put together in our country. And more importantly, the goal is to have had this represent over 80% of individuals who historically were not represented in research data. So this is the most diverse data set we have ever assembled as a country. Again, so that in the future, when we take the learnings of the research and apply it to the clinic, this will now apply to many, many more individuals than it did in the past. So the All of Us program is run through the National Institutes of Health, and I think I kind of overall went over this slide already, but it's really a historic longitudinal effort to advance our understanding and accelerate precision medicine, ultimately to improve the health of all of us. It's a really big transformational change in how we have approached diversity, and making sure that everyone who, you can think of any definition of diversity, by geography, by health status, by self-identity, by ancestry, we want to make sure that everyone is maximally included in this data set. And then it's being partnered with all this really critical survey data around social and structural determinants of health, because that is that environmental exposures, again, that where genetics is just a fraction, but we have to understand about all of the environment and all of the experiences and combine all of that together to truly understand how we end up with ultimately, being healthy and living to 102, or, having cancer already at 45. So I myself had melanoma at the age of 45, and I don't know why. No one in my family had had that cancer before. I happened to practice medicine in a really underserved area where there were really high cancer rates. And so I myself was in that environment every single day for years and years and years. And then I developed melanoma, and it was actually on the bottom of my foot, which is really interesting. So it wasn't like out hanging out in the sun and getting sun exposure. And so I kept wondering, again, coming back to the radon conversation, what was in the ground that was coming up through our clinic? And it just so happened to be that our clinic was built on slag, which, if you're familiar, in Pittsburgh, we have all these mountainous hills, but they're slag hills. They were the waste products of the steel industry and mining industry. And so they are full of all sorts of toxicities. So not only how did that impact my health, but how was that impacting my patients' health who had spent their entire lives in this neighborhood and community? So really, really critical to combine the environment plus our genetic predisposition. So I myself I'm actually patient number 8 out of a million, or participant number 8 out of a million, because we were the first site to launch here in Pittsburgh nationally. And so that's not me in the photo, but I am 1 in a million. And I'm very, very proud of it. And I really hope that this data will be studied for the next 30, maybe even 50 years to really advance science. And these are my motivation right here. This is my 3 kids getting their very first COVID vaccine, which, again, talking about huge science that's happened in our lifetime. And so this is what precision medicine means to me, that they were able to get these vaccines and now be a senior in high school, a graduating 8th grader, and a senior at Pitt Johnstown. And that's all I have. Thank you so much.
So Melinda, you couldn't hear that, but a bunch of people applauded before I unmuted.
Oh, I couldn't hear, but thank you.
Hi, everybody. So if you don't mind sticking around for a few minutes, we would love to ask you some questions, if that's okay.
Of course.
Awesome. Okay, so I'll kick it off, and then I'll let the in-person audience and the Zoom audience get their questions going. So with all of us, I thought it was really cool that you mentioned that you were patient 80 of a million. What has changed with all of us since you started? Could you tell us a little bit about like what you might have discovered so far about different diseases and things like that?
Yeah, so one of the coolest stories actually that came out of all of us so far, there's so many, but one of the coolest ones that I like to talk about is again about the pandemic. So if everyone remembers, we first had that big outbreak in a nursing home in Seattle, right, in end of January, early February of 2020. And so we thought that was the first set of cases in our country when that first came. Well, all of us realized that they had been collecting samples, saliva samples, blood samples, all these different samples on patients who had been enrolling all around the country all through November of 2019, December 2019, January, February 2020. So they decided to ask the question, did any of our participants actually have COVID-19 before we saw that very first case? And guess what? 9 patients in the US did have COVID in our participant population as early as the end of December of 2019 and the first week of January of 2020. And so we now know, because of that data, that COVID was actually already here in the United States.
Wow. Okay, that is fascinating. So thank you for sharing that. And like, I think that really speaks to everybody in the room, the people watching online, and people watching the recording, the power of participating in citizen science projects like the All of Us research program and contributing your data and filling out these surveys to make a difference. So I'll ask one more question, then we'll open it up. So if I know in Pennsylvania, y'all are mainly focused on survey recruitment these days. How would I participate if I wanted to, if I'm in the room in Philadelphia right now?
I apologize, but that broke up and I couldn't hear you.
Oh yeah, how can people participate in All of Us? What's your recommendation?
Well, my recommendation is to go to that link that All of Us website link, and to find out on that link if there are any opportunities near you to participate. But again, as I said earlier, even if it's not All of Us, I really want to encourage you to be open and consider, and maybe let All of Us inspire you to think about joining any research study that really speaks to you. All of Us is really great because anyone over 18 can join, and you don't have to have a specific health condition. But there are many, many research studies that may have meaning to you based on something that your family has perhaps experienced. So look at the All of Us website for possible opportunities. But if there is not one, I encourage you to be open and explore other possible research. It's a really amazing donation that you're making to science.
Phenomenal. Do we have any questions from people in the room? I can run the mic over to you if you have a question. Don't be shy. We have an awesome expert here who can take you on a gene journey. All right, here's the mic. Yeah.
Hi. I've lived in Philadelphia for most of my life. I've moved around a bit as well. And I was curious about what you've learned about the impact of trauma on disease presentation. I was doing some genealogy research here at the library the other day, and my daughter died in 2018 from hypertension, or the effects of hypertension. I had hypertension. My grandfather died from hypertension. And I found, like, going back maybe 2 generations, another person in my family died of exactly what my daughter died from. Cardiovascular hypertensive disease. So what have you learned about the impact of trauma on those kinds of diseases?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And first of all, let me just say I'm so sorry about your daughter, and thank you for sharing. When I was talking about that epigenetics, that is exactly the pathway that we feel trauma is impacting our health. That trauma can actually have biological changes in our cells that travel all the way down to our gene expression that may turn on or off different genes that could be protecting us from cardiovascular conditions or could increase our risk of developing cardiovascular conditions. We also know there are many, many inherited cardiovascular conditions. And in fact, in my clinic, we do test patients who have a strong family history of various heart health issues to see if this is one of the known types of genetic conditions that's traveling in families. Because many of those, if we know they exist, we can empower our patients to be super proactive and to follow screening and preventative measures to hopefully change those outcomes. And that's exactly what we want to do with this type of research. We want to empower all patients and their clinicians to ultimately improve our health outcomes.
Fantastic. Thank you for that answer. And thank you for your question. Do we have any other questions from folks in the room? Or just an insight you want to share too, since we have Mylinda here. We're so lucky to have her. There are no bad questions. All right, Jackie has a question. I'm running the mic over.
Hi, Mylinda. So, listen, I just want to know real quick. I'm on the environmental side, and I know I've been in the All of Us program since the beginning of it as well. But I guess is any data being actually collected when it comes to environmental situations like I live in a high radon area or PFAS, any chemical, is that being collected or analyzed as part of our DNA, for lack of a better word?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's not being analyzed as part of your DNA, but it is data that is separately being collected in certain subsets of populations. So there are sub-studies that are occurring where environmental exposures are being captured and then added to the comprehensive data profile for individual participants so that researchers can study that, as well as even data like our zip codes, right? Our zip codes that we live in can tell a lot about the things that we're being exposed to when we add that to data and research being collected in other studies around the environment. Even things like our zip codes can help identify food deserts and what type of nutrition individual patients and participants have access to or don't have access to, and then interpreting how that might be impacting their health. So really, really great question. And yes, absolutely, environmental data and all those structural determinants and social determinants of health are being captured.
Thank you for the question, Jackie, and thank you for that answer, Melinda. Last chance for questions. If you're on Zoom, you can also ask us in the chat too. But going once, going twice, questions from, oh, Aaron has one, let me run the mic over.
Thank you. This is a pretty generic, basic question, but given all this data that you're collecting, what are the types of questions?
I may have to have you repeat the question.
Privacy protections with all of this data. What are they?
Sorry, can you repeat
Okay,
again?
sorry, I moved too far away from my audio receiver. What are the privacy protections with the all of us data?
Well, that's a phenomenal question, and so important with any kind of research study, but the All of Us has put into place multiple layers of data security and privacy to ensure that our data is protected. One of the ways they have done this is they are not, even though I was talking about bringing all the data together, that is done virtually, and multiple sets of the data are stored in independent systems so that someone would actually have to attack and hack through all of them to line them up and connect the dots. And so this is actually some of the most cutting edge technology in protecting data and data security. Another way that it's being protected is every single research scientist has to be vetted who has access all the way down to the citizen sciences. And there are various levels of data that can be accessed. So citizen scientists can access things that are aggregate level data where there's no way that any individual could be identified through that data. And then research scientists such as myself at an academic institution, which might have a higher level access to like the genomic data, which obviously is the most identifiable data ever. We actually have to sign agreements that are punishable by even prison if we actually re-identified any of our participant data that we were studying. So a lot has been put in place to protect that. I always tell everyone though that I don't think that any data is 100% secure, and that there are folks out there who are intentionally always trying to get our data. So one of the other things that I think we constantly have to think about is how do we make sure that if someone ever accessed it, that data could not be used against us or to harm us. And that's sort of a society challenge, again, related to science. So I might put that right back at you guys.
I feel like that's a perfect note to end on, Melinda, unless you have any other parting words of wisdom for us.
Not much. I'm just going to go feed my kids.
Okay, thank you. We appreciate you. Have a good night.
Bye.
Bye. All right. So everybody, to kind of close us out today, so I'm just going to spotlight this video so our friends on Zoom can see it. I'll just share my screen. So we promised you genes and journeys today. I think you got the genes. Now we're going to end with a little bit of a journey. So I wanted to shout out Project Sidewalk. So I think you got different parts and pieces of citizen science today. So you heard about the Radon Project, how you can monitor things like radon in your home. That's data collection right there. You also learned about the All of Us research program, where you can fill out surveys and contribute things like your blood. And by contributing that data, you're part of citizen science. And then you can also analyze data with projects like Project Sidewalk. So the premise of this project, we don't have time to go too much into it, but if you want to stick around after, I have a tablet with me and we can do the project together. You can just come up to me at the SciStarter table. You can participate from anywhere, but the data you're analyzing is from specific cities. So I actually did this project the other day just for fun for my act of science for the day. As part of the 1 million acts of science, make sure y'all report your acts. I analyzed data related to a city in New Jersey. And what this project has you do is you basically go on a virtual journey on your computer. So I was virtually in this New Jersey city, and I was annotating the sidewalks for accessibility problems. So you may not realize it if you are in a wheelchair, for example, or don't have a cane, or don't need things like ramps. But there are lots of sidewalks that don't have curb ramps, or maybe they have inadequate curb ramps, or maybe the sidewalk just stops. And suddenly you're like, whoa, where did this grass come from? That can be very inaccessible for our friends. There can be obstacles that have surface problems, all sorts of issues. So when you participate in Project Sidewalk for the different cities they feature, you're able to annotate these issues and help those researchers. We're actually going to be interviewing one of those researchers on a webinar on April 29th. If you sign up in the back of our SciStarter sign-in sheet, I can email you the link so you can talk to John, who runs this project, directly. He's at the University of Washington. But I think it's a great project. I like that he takes the data and the findings and then gets in touch with community leaders about it. And you can also go through, I think this is another facet of citizen science that people often think about. They're like, how do we know this is good data, right? How do we know that the citizens who are analyzing this data did it correctly? The great thing Project Sidewalk does is you can be in the analysis side, or you can be on the validation side. So sometimes when I don't want to do the virtual journey and go through the city on my computer and annotate the sidewalks, I'll just validate other people's responses. So they have multiple people validate each annotation people make. So you can say, oh, okay, this person was right. That is missing a curb ramp. Oh, okay, that person was right. This obstacle is in the sidewalk. So yeah, I wanted to give that final shout out for today's buffet of science. Speaking of the buffet, we still have some snacks in the back, so make sure you grab that before you head out. I'm gonna put the classical tunes back on. I'll be in the back if anyone wants to try out Project Sidewalk with me. Make sure you sign up on our sign-in sheet for SciStarter, and I'll email you the recording of today, links associated with tonight's program, the Project Sidewalk project. And I know Jackie and Josh are going to stick around for a little bit too. You can talk to them. And also our friends from the Philadelphia Free Library, they'll be there too to talk about library programs. Do we have any final questions from our in-person or Zoom participants?
For the Zoom presentation on the 29th, it's going to be like this, or is it
Just a webinar.
Just a webinar, okay, and they're just going to be talking about the.
I'll be interviewing John and a few other researchers as well. Yeah, on April 29th, everybody, if you want to tune into that, I'll be interviewing. We have a track like every day. We have calendars in the back if you're interested. And we do in-person stuff like that too. Darlene, our founder, is based in Philadelphia. So we have pop-up stuff all the time. You can make your SciStarter account. We'll keep you in the loop about all sorts of different things.
Okay, I didn't know that this was on. I should have done this from where I am.
Yeah. Well, and that's why we have the Zoom options.
Yeah,
for
that's what
accessibility.
I'm saying, if I had known.
Yeah. Yeah, make your SciStarter account. I'll tell you about all the Zoom opportunities.
I'll do that. All right, thank you.
Fantastic, thank you. Any other questions from folks before we wrap up? Okay, well, I'll get the classical tunes back on. You can find me in the back, and thanks again. Let's get closer to 1 million acts of science this month. Thank you.